Good evening. This is the Greenfield Public Schools School Committee meeting. It's Wednesday, August 10, 2022, 6 p.m. We're at the John Zahn Community Center, 35 Pleasant Street in Greenfield. Per the open meeting law, any member of the public may make an audio or video recording of this meeting. We'll move right into our agenda and roll call first from Secretary Ekstrom, please.
Member Deneve. Here. Secretary Ekstrom, I'm here. Member Johnson-Musad.
Here.
Member Martini. Here. Chair Proietti.
Here.
Vice Chair Wall.
Here.
Mayor Wiegartner. Here. We have a quorum and we are all present.
Wonderful. Thank you. A call to order at 6 p.m. And we'll approve the minutes from our two July meetings, the regular meeting on July 13th and the special meeting on July 25. Those are in your packet. I would take a motion to approve the minutes as a consent item for both meetings. Any takers on the motion? That was the mayor, and a second?
Second.
That was Member Martini, I believe. And any discussion of the minutes?
Just a typo. I don't know if it makes sense to share, just typographical corrections. But on the 25th, on the second page, it just says differing recommendations from Desi versus Department of.
Oh, sure. Yep. Just one of the bullet points there, missing a letter. Any other discussion items? We'll make sure that Susan Farber gets, oh, she's got it, okay. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll move to a vote. Any dissenting votes or any abstaining votes? Okay, and that passes unanimously. And public comment, it looks like Susan Farber's still walking around getting information from people about public comment, but we can start with our first person. Okay, come on up. You'll have to turn the microphone on. You just hold the push button until the collar turns green like mine is there. You'll have 3 minutes and just state your name and where you live. Town or city that you live in is fine, and then you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
If I interrupt you, I don't enjoy it, but it means time's up, sorry.
No, thank you.
Go ahead.
This is working, okay. So I'm Andra Dunhauer. I live in Greenfield. Is that all you need from me at the beginning? Okay. I just wanted to come and speak tonight because I wanted to share some of my experience and just ask for some changes to be made in the way that things are done here, because I'm seeing a lot of problems in the school community and in the broader community. A little bit about me, I have a professional background in social services for a couple of decades. You'd probably see the shadows under my eyes if I hadn't taken a 2-hour nap this afternoon. I've worked in schools and with schools, trained in child development and family support. So I'm coming not just as a mother of an 11-and-a-half-year-old in Greenfield, but also as somebody who has some experience with the systems that you're all trying to work with and do your best with that are under-resourced and have been since before COVID. We moved here in 2019. My child was in 3rd grade. We had a wonderful teacher, and from the very beginning, my experience with administration was that communication was very sparse. And when there was communication, it was very, very hyper positive and not really rich with kind of connections and making me feel like, wow, I can really like step into this community and be part of it. So I noticed that. And moving through COVID happening and remote schooling, I saw teachers trying their best without a lot of support from administration. And again, I know that was happening across the country. That's not a condemnation of Greenfield itself, but I saw that happening. And moving forward into my child going into 5th grade, I was looking forward to her being able to go in person again. And it was an absolute disaster. And it was painful to see what happened to my child through that whole experience. And that was despite wonderful best efforts of teachers and the principal of that school. One of the things that brought me to tears, many things did last year, but one of them was when her advisory teacher asked me to send in a picture with my child, because my child was going to be doing the I forget what it was called, but it was basically show and share. When it was described to me what it was, what they were doing in 5th grade was show and share. And it upset me a lot because I know something about child development, and that told me a lot about what teachers saw kids needed. That's what those kids needed. They were 10 and 11-year-olds in that size body who needed that kind of social emotional instruction. This teacher was not, she's been trained to be a middle school math teacher. That's what she wants to do with her life. But what she saw was that's what the students' needs were. And I was really upset to hear that the principal was not coming back, because my understanding from the staff was that they felt very supported. And I was excited when there were these listening sessions that happened with the Collaborative for Educational Services.
Just finish your thought.
Yeah. Nothing has been done with these. It's like they disappeared. There's really valuable information in here. And I really would love it. And I think the rest of the community would love it. I'm new here, but if folks were accountable for the information that's in here. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just before you start, state your name and where you live before you start, and you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Bram Morenas, and I live in Greenfield. I teach in Springfield. I teach in a middle high school. In Springfield. I teach digital literacy and computer science. And I've been concerned about what I've heard about the Yonder solution being proposed. I don't know what the status of it is, but I feel like there's a strategic approach that would suggest not leading with that one. I'm not in the school district, so I don't know how you guys, what's led to this step. To give an analogy, opening up the drilling, allowing more oil to be pulled out of the ground as a way of addressing climate change, to me is similar to adopting a top-down control approach like Yonder to deal with the harms that students have felt from COVID, this fracturing of the community, and all the other sort of impacts on resilience that we need to be addressing as communities. I feel that schools should be educating, and that there's a lot for parents and students together to learn about the behavioral addictions associated with cell phones, that if we just addressed controlling the cell phones in school, because we just go home and use them, and that isn't helping them there. So how can schools partner with parents to talk about the role these cell phones are playing in students' lives? And how can schools work with students, because there are many students in the schools who understand the problems with cell phones and want to be allies, to help promote a school policy that says we don't use cell phones in class, which is different than saying no cell phones in school, because if you're partnering with students, you're allowing them to have some agency where they could say, well, during my breaks in the hall or my recess, if I want to look at my cell phones, I can. If there's a decision that we want to have them out entirely, I would think that decision would want to be made by the community and the parents all together, that's where we want to go. And that signals this resilience, that signals this building of community connections, because kids are going onto social media as a sort of dissociation from themselves and others. And if they're feeling dissociated, you can see how they would get that way from being, in remote learning for a while and all that. That's what I think we need to address first. Being addicted to the phone so much, though, that if a teacher says, don't take your phone out in class, and a student does it anyway, and then a teacher says, okay, put your student in the basket since you didn't listen to me and you took your phone out in class, and the student doesn't, and now you have to have a burden on the administrators for the discipline ladder. May I finish my thought? I may not? Okay. Oh, beautiful, thanks. Yeah, to me it's just, the problem is bigger than the cell phones. And I think we should address the problem at its root, which is respect for the teacher, respect for each other, respect for the students, and then being able to address things in ways that don't disempower folks and turn them into sort of criminals being managed. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. If we're going across, go. just want to make sure you state your name and town you live in. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Paul Jablon. I live here in Greenfield. As some of you know, I spent 25 years as a public school teacher creating with my colleagues and my students schools that went from being fairly dysfunctional to being, as I was talking about, having previously disengaged kids. And then spent another 20 years in about 30 states working with superintendents and principals and teachers especially in creating school cultures and that were effective for learning. So I'm speaking first, though, as a citizen of Greenfield and wanting my taxes spent well, but especially about worrying about the kids in school. So what I see this issue with cell phones, and this builds on what Bram was saying, where we're looking at this is a symptom. This isn't the problem. And that any money we would spend on this really should be spent on dealing with the teachers and the students working out methods of empowerment and giving kids, every kid in the middle school and high school, skills in conflict resolution. Take that $16,000 and you can get training. You can have 8 training sessions for every middle school and high school teacher in conflict resolution, to not for them, but for them to have the skills to have every kid all year long learn conflict resolution skills. So as Bram talked about, they need to talk about how do we want this classroom to operate? Where do each of us, what works and what doesn't work? And so I would, again, just say, you're looking at a symptom, just as all the other behaviors that seem to conflict with good education going on. It's not the problem. We need to get to the problem and empower kids. Thank you. And if you see me walking out, it's not because I don't think this is important. I thought this was so important that I snuck it in before I went out somewhere to another meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Good evening, Doug Selwyn in Greenfield. And I'm not going to talk about most of this because my colleagues there have already said that. But I have 2 concerns that I want to add. One is I'm not sure, but I don't think there's been a real conversation with the community about the Yonder issue. I don't think parents and families have been involved, and I don't think teachers have been involved. Part of that is making a decision in the middle of summer, of course, when people are not so available. But I think it would be unfortunate if it was simply a top-down decision that didn't include the community, because as Bram and Paul both said, this is an educational issue, and involving the community in that education is important. This is I think, a great opportunity for teachers and students to work together to problem solve and to learn how to do that. So I think that's really important, and I hope there's no decision being made without that. And my second is really a question, because I heard as of Monday night that actually a decision has already been made. And I don't know if that's accurate or not. But if it is, that would be really disappointing and troubling, because we're here talking as if the decision hasn't been made. But my impression is that it has. And, well, I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Ann Childs of Greenfield, and I apologize in advance for being a fast speaker. Even though the Yonder cell pouches have already been purchased, I have 3 concerns. First, the way parents were treated by the district as it made the decision, if the program will work, and the price tag. Firstly, the district shouldn't cut parents out of the conversation when making an expensive, drastic policy change. The district struggles with transparency and communication issues. At Monday's meeting, we were told that the district is working to improve the phone system so parents can call the school and reach someone, but the district needs to earn parents' trust back by letting them see the new lines of communication working before cutting off the parents' individual lines of communication with their own kids. Trust and communication between parents and the district is a two-way street. When parents are told they must sit back and accept whatever decisions are handed down to us, it creates an adversarial relationship at a time when we are struggling to retain students. We parents are asking the school administration for a partnership, not a dictatorship. Secondly, will the program work? If the enforcement of current rules is inadequate to prevent cell phone disruptions, why do we believe kids who ignore current phone rules won't just ignore yonder rules? And for the kids following the rules, is collective punishment really the lesson we want to teach them? Wouldn't it be better to prepare our kids for the adult world by comprehensive digital health and literacy education and teaching them tools and strategies for self-regulation instead of doing a heavy-handed zero-tolerance program? And where is the yonder data, or any information really? I'm especially looking for good, solid data that doesn't come as part of a yonder sales rep's material from their marketing department. Finally, program cost. Can our district afford a big, reoccurring fee for what are essentially beer koozies with embedded magnets? A personal anecdote. At Monday's meeting, I got to handle the pouch and magnet. I was able to seal up the pouch, but it got stuck when I tried to unlock it, and the sales rep had to whack it against the big magnet with a decent amount of force to get it open. Who is liable if a kid's pouch jams and a slam against the magnet to unjam it lands slightly off target, shattering the phone screen? I ask who is liable because the impression that Monday's meeting left me with was that the primary reason that the cheaper options, shoe caddies for phones, locking classroom cubbies, and the like, were rejected was because the school district doesn't want to be responsible for lost or damaged phones, and that leaving the pouches in the student's possession keeps the school off the hook financially. So we're expected to trust the schools to keep our children safe when the schools don't even trust themselves to keep our kids' property safe. The school district owes the parents and Greenfield taxpayers the justification for why this, the most expensive option out there, is the only program that will work and the only one being considered. I have many more questions and quibbles, especially safety concerns, and I wish I had a chance to discuss them in greater depth, but alas, 3-minute limit. Thank you for volunteering. I know it's a really thankless job.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? That's everyone you have, Susan Farber? Okay, thank you all. We go at this point into item 4 on the agenda, the reports from the administration. We have first a report from the Assistant Superintendent, who is on vacation. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, I thought I had a broken one. So on Karen's behalf, her report at this point is primarily referencing the professional development that has been planned regarding the 2 resource programs that we adopted last year. You folks, I'm sure, will remember the adoption of CKLA for our English language arts resources, and professional development is scheduled for the beginning of school during our first professional development days. Illustrative math was also continued last year from grades 5 through 7. And then we have a preschool program that was adopted last year. It's Get Set for School that integrates all of the preschool standards in a structured manner so that our preschool teachers have a guiding program for them, so they will get professional development, and you can see that the PD will be spaced out recurring during the school year, so it's not a one and done. They'll have the opportunity to learn about it, work with the programs, and then repeat some of the professional development throughout the year. We have finished the weeding of Federal Street School, and you'll see that the request to declare those weeded books as surpluses in your, on your agenda. And we did get volunteers from the high school library club, which was wonderful. And then we're moving to Discovery School at Four Corners. So, and I'm very pleased to say that one of the people who had been doing the weeding for us last year actually came on board as a full-time staff person over the summer. She'll be our middle school library media specialist. So I was very happy with that. And then mentor training, we had a lot of new staff last year, and we are looking to have quite a few new staff people this year. And so Karen is offering a training for our current professional status teachers so that they can become mentors. So as she said, there are 5. I thought we might have had a couple more since she wrote her report. So we'll be training at least 5 new mentors prior to the start of next year. So that's.
Thank you. Questions from the school committee or comments about the assistant superintendent's report? Member Martini, please go ahead.
Last month, I believe that Karen had said that the district was still considering and making determinations about interventions in Tier 2 and 3 when it comes to literacy, and I just wondered if there is any forward movement or additional information about that as of this month.
I would prefer to get information from her. There are intervention level materials that are part of these programs. She would be able to speak to them in more detail, but there are programs available, resources as part of both of these. So I would rather that she spoke to it in detail rather than be incorrect.
And also, last month you had said that you were in ongoing discussions with the special education director about needs for literacy methodology training and resources in special education as well, and I wondered if there is any additional information since then.
I know that since the last meeting, Janet has provided a list of staff to be trained in a specialized reading program, and I am waiting to have the final PD schedule, but they're in conversation about having that scheduled. I know that it was arranged, just making sure that we have the hours available for PD. As I've shared with the committee before, we don't have as many hours available for professional development as we really would need, so we're looking to see how it can be sparsed out across the course of the year. So.
Okay, what program is that, or do you not recall?
I recall. I'm generally the specific program identified by the district to be used is a decision that can be made at the district level, but I will share that we're working with Linda Mood Bell to provide training. So, but we describe it, it is a research-based, language-based, systematic program for reading instruction.
Right, that's great. And I know we have talked about the limited time available for PD quite a bit, and I was just wondering if there are any ideas for changes in terms of the school calendar that might be helpful.
So any of that would have to be negotiated, and we are currently in negotiations with 2 of our units, so we can't really talk about the ongoing negotiations. But I can tell you that any of the time on learning, workday, work year, school calendar would all have to be part of collective bargaining.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Other questions or comments from the school committee? Okay, so we'll move on to, thank you, the superintendent's report.
All right, I have to find it. Somehow buried it. Okay.
Sorry.
We're all set to?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have my written report. I'll share that we are moving forward with getting the schedule for the building visits taken care of. I have areas identified by the principals for each of the buildings, so I'm doing the building by building schedule. Jean, as the chair of the Building and Construction Committee, has received an invitation, President Gilmore has, and Lauren is extending invitations to each member of both of those groups individually. And as soon as the day-to-day, well, not the day-to-day, the sort of minute-by-minute schedule is finalized, I will send it out to all of you individually, but it is still the 23rd at 4:30, based on the number of buildings and the spaces that people are hoping that everyone will visit. I would say that if someone participates in the whole tour, it's probably a few hours. So I'm trying to do the schedule in a way that's quite realistic. So if someone needs to come in or leave at particular times, they'll have a realistic breakdown of where they might actually meet up with the group. So you should get that shortly, not shortly tonight, shortly in the next few days. So the social emotional curriculum, I actually provided a document for all of you to reference. It's the CASEL document. I know I've talked about the CASEL competencies a few times in talking about the social emotional learning work. So this is a graphic that represents what those are. There's a little bit of a breakdown of what is addressed under each of the competencies. So I thought that might be a helpful frame. So we are doing our SEL writing. We've had the ability to add some members since it's summer, so we have representatives across all of the grade levels, including AEL, which is very nice. What we are looking to do is so advisory at this point at the high school is going to be once a week, so our goal is to have at least one distinct lesson for each week of the month. The months are connected to one of the CASEL competencies. So for example, September would be social awareness, and then we'll move through self-awareness, self-management, relationship skills, and decision-making, and then we would repeat that cycle for the last 5 months of the school year. So the goal is to create at least one lesson for each week of the month for the advisories, representing some of the skills that are under each of the competencies. We're also looking to integrate work that is connected to the Sandy Hook Promise. Like one of the first elements that we're including is their work around Start with Hello, which really seems to be a very nice opening to the school year so that staff and students alike can focus on meeting each other, learning how behavior impacts others in their environment. And some staff at the high school have been doing that. Lisa Moore, who's one of our teachers at the high school, has been integrating elements from the Sandy Hook Promise for years. So it really is work that we think is important enough to include across the district. So that's just one example of that integration. And we're also integrating work that was done, has been started by Dr. Lourdes Alvarez-Ortiz about asset-based trauma-informed care. One of the elements there is that students and staff need to have a sense of belonging. So again, the work about Start with Hello integrates nicely into a focus in September of trying to create a sense of belonging. So I share that as an example to show how we're working to integrate what's been happening in the district and not to have what staff had previously described as sort of the one-shot professional development that wasn't repeated or ongoing. So it's a lot of work, but we're moving nicely through it. And we have another session tomorrow. So we've been able to meet for, 3 to 4 hours at a time, given that it's summer, which is good. It's hard to do curriculum writing an hour at a time. So the goal of this is really to create the core, a strong core around social emotional learning. I know that we talked before many times about the response to intervention or the mass tiered system of support triangle, where the base of the triangle really represents the core instruction, and that's not just academic, but it's also social emotional behavioral. So the goal of this SEL curriculum is to provide that strong core instruction. As we go through writing these lessons, we are starting to identify very clear areas where students may need additional support. For example, in 1 month, we talk about recognizing and naming feelings. That's more elementary language, of course, but, and so we know some of our students may not be well versed in how to recognize or name feelings in themselves or others. So we know that we need to figure out a way to provide an additional layer of support for those students, for example, with our counseling staff. So we're also, as we go, identifying core, identifying where places that we need to support in addition. So we are obviously going to be able to identify professional development needs. We've already started that. So the work that we're doing will build and begin to influence other areas, such as the professional development calendar. But it's exciting and we're moving along. So we'll definitely have work done and able to be provided to our students when school starts. So. It's a reminder that our VAX bus is coming. I had sent a message out to families on July 25th. I'll do another one to remind them, but this is work being done in conjunction with FERCOG and the Greenfield Health Department. So I read that and thought I didn't put Greenfield, just green. Can't read. On a related note, not included, omitted in my update, is following the last school committee meeting where we heard from the epidemiologist and the health department, is I have an appointment this week with Jennifer Hoffman from the health department to talk about the results and what we'd be able to do. As expected, or I should say not unexpected, the Department of Education is not recommending all of the same things that were recommended by the epidemiologist. So I expect Jennifer and I will have a very good conversation, and then we'll need to follow up. The one thing that I can say that was shared at that meeting was that it doesn't take long to do the pooled testing, and the nursing staff in district does not have that same perspective because they have to do all of the pooled testing in 6 buildings, and then if there's a positive pool, they have to follow up and do a second layer of testing for any positives. They're doing some contact tracing, they're doing parent notification, so it's more work on the ground for the nurses than I think maybe the impression was from that meeting. And at this point, we are still looking for nurses. So I do have questions about how we would implement pooled testing that they're recommending when we don't even have our full complement of nurses right now. Just a challenge, but we're gonna have the conversation about what we can do, what might be layers of things, and then I'll certainly share that information with everybody. Okay, staffing. We are moving forward hiring. We have certainly had vacancies, but we have hired for many of our positions. We have gotten associate principals, teachers, specialists. We are continuing, as we have been, with openings for instructional assistants, and then some of the positions that have been recently made vacant. Obviously, we've not hired in the last day or so, but we are continuing to work on that. There's going to be a regional job fair that we just got information about. So we'll be participating in the regional job fair, but more information is to come about that. We are working collaboratively now, so if one of our administrators has an IA position open and they interview 5 candidates, but 4 of them are wonderful, but they pick preferred candidate for their building, they are contacting the other administrators to say, please, interview this person, I think they'd be a great fit. So we're not isolating candidates by building, but rather trying to share the wealth. We have a lot of wonderful people who are applying, but we can only hire one of the position that's open at the time. We're also doing waiver requests for teachers as appropriate, so some of our staff are close to getting their licensure, or they have one licensure but need another, so we're working with them and the administrators and filing requests for waivers with the Department of Ed. The one place that we've had a little bit of lag in process is waivers with nurses. We have registered nurses apply, but if there's no bachelor's level degree, we have to request a waiver, and those are going to the level of the commissioner, not the waiver department. So, because nurses can have their registered nurse license without having a bachelor's degree, but Department of Ed license requires the bachelor's degree. So, it's a glitch we're working through. They are aware that there is a shortage of nurses for, I was going to say for schools, but I don't think it's just for schools. They're aware of that, and Lauren has been quite good about intermittently checking in to see what the status of our waivers are. Unfortunately, we haven't had a lot of applicants for the nurse leader, and some of them are RN, but not licensable by the department, so we're going to refresh the posting and see if we have other applicants that may be interested as we go. I'll go a little out of order, although, I have one other thing that I apologize wasn't in my report written. After the NASDAQ report was provided to the City Council, Councilor Healy asked a question about roof repair at the high school, which prompted some follow-up, and what we discovered is that there was an error in reporting somewhere along the interview and follow-up continuum, and we have confirmed that there are no areas of need on the high school roof. So NASDAQ gave an amendment to that. It will be forwarded to the City Council, but you all have a copy of that. So that was positive news. It was very positive news. The handbooks, I know student handbooks were written last year because they had not been done, so they were created for the district. But the current group of administrators wanted to make some updates to the handbooks, and we've been working with one of the attorneys from Dupree to make sure that everything in there is what's required and eliminating or modifying some things. So we will have updated handbooks for you folks to review shortly. Unfortunately, we might have to ask about a meeting to do that, but the handbooks will be rather meaty and you wouldn't have had time to review them before tonight. So, but those are coming. We've done some nice collaborative work on those. So the last piece I will share is, on the cell phone pouches, which I know is an area of interest. We did have the information session Monday night, and one of the things that Derek spoke about that has been done, it'll be posted in the next day or so, is a shared Google document so that parents can ask questions of Michelle or Derek about the function, factual questions about them, and then they'll remain there so that if anyone else has questions, they can look at what's been asked already, see if they can find the answer. So that will be one document shared between middle school, high school, because most questions we anticipate would be duplicative from middle school and high school. Okay, we're going to send out additional information. We have resources that will be sent out on the website. We will send it out in School Messenger, and hard copies will be sent out with the back-to-school information from the middle and high school. And then, because I know at the last meeting, there was discussion about the fact that from the administrative standpoint, we had moved forward talking about this plan because of the requests from the teachers. And I did provide the summary of comments that were submitted in email. There were other comments shared with the principals that, were verbal. But I think at least it will give you a sense of the feedback that the two principals and myself have gotten from the staff, which is why we looked in this direction. I did purchase the pouches because it was a better decision to have them and then potentially change our minds and be able to return them than to make the decision to move forward and we were not able to get the devices. So we did purchase them, but again, confirmed that we could return them if that was the decision that was made administratively. So that's my report as best as I can tell, unless I forgot something else.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the school committee? I saw Member Taneev's hand first. Go ahead.
Oh, there we go. Got my green light. Okay. What was the exact language on the feedback from the parents? How did you elicit the feedback? Did you ask them their opinions on yonder versus not yonder? What was the language that you used?
I did not solicit opinion from parents.
I'm sorry, not from parents, from teachers, because this paper that you've given us is just statements by teachers, but how did you come by them? What was the exact language used?
So two things. Derek forwarded the article that had been in the recorder, just sent that link to his staff, and he received comments back. And at the middle school, the question was asked, have you had issues with cell phones? And so the comments were provided.
So it was, have you had issues with cell phones, or was it, have you had issues with cell phones and would you like the yonder pouch? Like, I'm just curious what the language was, because I think the language is really important that you used in seeking the information from the teachers, because in your technological use survey, only one teacher mentioned cell phones in all of the comments entirely. So I'm just curious what the language was.
I don't remember the language, and I didn't send the emails. I am happy to get the language.
That would be great, because it's important, I think, that it's not biased, because I have heard from other teachers that surveys that were sent to them in other districts were quite biased, and they didn't know that they were answering basically survey questions about specifically the yonder pouch.
I'm happy to get the language. What I can tell you is I know at the high school, the article was sent.
Okay.
The tech survey that you're referencing, that was part of my evaluation documentation.
Yeah.
Those questions certainly were not about this. It was a very different context. And I don't know if, I think the questions asked on the tech survey were part of the document.
It was, how is technology a problem, a pro and cons in the classroom? What is going on that's great and what is going on that's wrong? And one person out of like 100 mentioned cell phones.
I think the context of that survey was them knowing that we were trying to make a plan in terms of buying or updating technology. So I think the context was somewhat different.
Okay, and then I have two more questions. Under the Castle 5
Yes.
sheet that you just gave us, you mentioned self-management. I asked about that last month because I thought that we should discuss self-management, but I do recall that I was told that the kids don't really have the ability to regulate that. So my question is, if we're teaching this, then will this area of competence address the cell phone use in the classroom? And would expanding it be worth the same expenditure as yonder? Do you see it as making a class topic? Because we're talking about potentially digital citizenship courses. Is this not under that umbrella? And have you explored that?
So in a general statement, the self-management piece that we're talking about during the curriculum writing now, the stage that we're in, is really talking about students recognizing their own emotions, recognizing proactive ways that they can channel emotions, strategies that they can use to like remove themselves from challenging situations, recognizing emotions in others. Because as far as I'm aware, and the feedback I have from my SEL committee, is that this isn't instruction that has been provided in a comprehensive way across the district. So we're beginning ensuring that we have covered basic skills. Obviously, the lessons progress in complexity the higher up in the grades you go. You know, we're not delivering the same lesson to second graders that we would to the high school. So at this point, we are not specifically addressing cell phone use in October of this year. We are ensuring, one of the pieces of the curriculum review is that we're ensuring that we have added or will add all of the digital citizenship standards into our instruction across the district. That's one of the reasons that we were very excited and thought it was important to add library media specialists who can very specifically do that through their instruction as well. But right now, can I guarantee you that all of the standards of digital literacy are being delivered consistently at all the grade levels? I can't say that that has been embedded across the board. So that's work that we have to do. It's very important, and we're also required to make sure we're teaching it. So at some point, do I anticipate that through the SEL or through the health curriculum or other courses, we could be talking about addiction or related topics? I do, but I don't know that we're there yet.
Okay, and then I have one last question. Here in this paragraph on the first page, the second paragraph, it says that you're advancing educational equity and excellence through authentic school, family, community partnerships to establish learning environments and experiences that feature trusting and collaborative relationships. How do you plan to do that?
That's part of what our work is going to be for next year. We have communication changes that are going to be implemented. We will have the forums that are coming up around the redistricting. There are a lot of ways that we can do it. We recognize that the communication is not what we want it to be, and it's not what families want it to be. I understand that. So that's absolutely a goal for me and all of the administrators. So there's a lot of different ways we're going to do that.
Do you have a rough timeline for that? Because I know that we've all been asking this many times, and the response is, we know and we're working on it. So what is that? Is that like, I know we're working on it, and then like next year? Or like, are we going to see concrete steps next month presented
Yes.
by you?
Yes?
That would be wonderful. I look forward to hearing that.
Mayor Rita Gardner, go ahead.
Just a couple of questions and a comment. Remind me again on the emotional learning curriculum. What grades are covered in that? Is it K through 12?
All grades.
Okay.
Pre-K as well.
It is the bonus of the Get Set for School curriculum that we have for preschool is a lot of this is already embedded in a preschool program,
Yeah.
but they're lessons for all grades K through 12.
Okay, good to know. Just a comment on the VAX bus and your a meeting with Director Hoffman. I'm concerned to hear that DESE is not going to fund any kind of testing. So if we decide to do nothing, zero.
Nothing.
There is only because I met with her today as my normal meeting, there is a grant, an availability to get a significant amount of tests out there for a fairly significant amount of money, but not thousands, not millions of dollars. So I'm hoping that she'll discuss that with you, and maybe we can talk about the reality of whether it can be done or not. I think there's certain times of the year where we want to make sure that we are testing throughout the year. Certain times throughout the year that we want to make sure we're testing.
I definitely am looking forward to the conversation with her. I think there are elements to the logistics in the school that we're going to really have to talk about. Like I said, and granted, I know it wasn't Jennifer that had shared the time. I don't believe it was her that shared the time it took from their perspective to do pooled testing.
Right.
But either her or the epidemiologist had said it was 2 hours. And then when I share that with our nursing staff, they said that's not accurate. It was a substantial, and we had 2 health assistants in the district last year that we did not retain because this was the direction that the department was going in. The pooled testing was not something being sustained. So not only do we not have our full complement of nurses for regular school, we are down the 2 health assistants that we had added.
I understand understanding.
No, I know. I think we really have to have conversations about the actual logistics of things. And then, not to mention,
The cost.
how long of a program are we looking? Are there times of year?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of different options we can talk about. Some things we've not given up, the hand washing, the hand sanitizer. We do still have masks available for anyone who wants them. I know I wasn't able to log on to a commissioner's back to school update. There's another date coming up toward the end of the month I'll log on to, but there were some notes that came out of it. And the department is still encouraging all districts to make welcome anyone who would like to wear masks, and we certainly have been doing that. And we still have all the air purifiers. It is certainly an expense to keep buying the filters, but that's something we've continued to do. So there are mitigation strategies in place. But I'm interested to talk to her about, what do they anticipate for the flu season this year? And how will we work together to get through any spike in illness? Because I think, something's going to come at some point, even if it's the typical expected seasonal flu, so.
And on the potential for, you mentioned that you had purchased the cell phone pouches now in anticipation of needing them, obviously, and then and using them and perhaps deciding to go a different route. Is there a time frame under which you can return them? Is it 6 months, a year, or do you know?
I don't recall. I will look into it. I did know, I made sure we could return them upon purchase, but I would have to double check to see if they're, if at the end of 2 years they could be.
Yeah.
But I just don't recall off the top of my head.
All right, thanks.
Sure.
I saw Secretary Ekstrom first, and then Member Martini.
I just want to piggyback on what the mayor was asking about with DESE and funding.
Yes.
So I know that superintendents have meetings with each other and all of those things. Is there sort of a growing movement amongst the superintendents, if you will, of saying, look, DESE, if we're going to do this, you're going to need to help us out, or anything along those lines? I'm just curious.
So our school year superintendent collaborations haven't started yet. There's too many people on vacations throughout the summer. In individual conversations, I'm not hearing the growing desire to start pooled testing again, but, that could change. That was I haven't heard yet, but.
Member Martini, go ahead.
Not about COVID, but I wanted to know if the district is doing anything or gathering any information pertaining to monkeypox, as this is the new epidemic, and it's not airborne, but is spread by physical contact and contact with clothing and things like that. And I imagine that might be an issue for students in contact sports, for example, or something like that. So I wanted to ask for your input about that.
I will be having that conversation with Jennifer this week. I'm sort of distressed that we have to talk about a new thing.
Sorry.
But no, it's out there, so we'll, that'll be part of the agenda. We have multiple hours blocked for our conversation, so I'm sure she'll be thrilled.
Okay, looking forward to that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, about staffing, I know last month you said that it sounded like things were very promising as far as the hiring of the Director of Behavioral Services position, and so I was wondering if that has come to fruition at this point, or are we still sort of on the edge of our seats about that?
We have a contract. Yep. Somebody will be here on site 3 days a week and then available virtually the other 2. But We're very excited. It's a very veteran licensed clinical social worker, diplomat in his field, has worked with corrections, adult and juvenile, has worked in residential programs, has consulted with schools. And I was fortunate to work with him for many years. So I know the quality of work, and we're excited that we're going to be able to have that level of support. As a matter of fact, he's going to start tomorrow, and we'll be meeting with Michelle at the middle school.
Okay. Are you able to share a name?
Don Casella.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry, missed
That's
that
okay.
part.
That's all right. All the qualifications and vote of confidence first. And I might be jumping different topics, but I had a staffing-related question about the budget. So I noticed this before, and I wanted to ask about the line under district-wide for the volunteer program coordinator. I just noticed that it's not expended.
Can you tell me which document you're looking at?
I am looking at the year-to-date budget report on page 7. And it's the first line item on the second section.
You're not on.
There we go.
So I just noted that
Correct.
that money has not been expended, and I was wondering, is this like an open position that is available, it just hasn't been filled, or what is that? Because we're talking about student engagement, the need to create a sense of belonging. This is something that was identified and talked about through PTO at GMS last year, as far as increasing opportunities for students to participate in school activities that make them feel like they do belong and have a sense of ownership over their school and take pride in it and what have you. But I know it can be challenging to drum up volunteers from the community to help create those things and make them happen. So a volunteer program coordinator would be lovely, but it just looks as though maybe we have money for that, but we don't have a person.
I can tell you from the previous times that we were here, that was a position, and I think it was just, I'll say, not just understanding the value of it carried over, but nobody would ever fill the position, and then decisions were made that for coordinating volunteering in the district, it was taken on by building administrators, coordinating any volunteers within the buildings and/or through the superintendent's office and her executive assistant. But you're correct, there was a position that was not filled this past year.
So Christine, are we going to have this position?
It's not one that we had intended to fill, given it hasn't been filled, but I mean, I'm open to conversation about it.
Okay. Do you know if it was a part-time or a full-time? I imagine it's part-time.
Given what's budgeted, I would say part-time.
It was part-time, correct.
Okay, all right.
You're all set, Member Martin? No.
No, of course not. Sorry, Amy. So on to the cell phone pouches. So the Google document that you mentioned being created so that parents could ask questions about the pouches themselves, those would be answered by representatives from Yonder?
No, generally it would be answered by Derek or Michelle.
Okay.
And then if it's so technical that we can't, provide the answer, we'll find out. But one of the two of them would be answering questions.
So, okay, so it says here that, and you mentioned that this is to ask factual questions about the use of the pouches themselves. What about questions that parents have for the school administration?
They can contact me or Derek or Michelle by email, by phone.
Through
Absolutely.
the use of this Google document also?
Oh, no, we can call or email.
Okay. So when we were discussing this last month, we had heard about situations in which a student maybe is told to put their phone away in class, which they're already supposed to have off and away according to the rules, and issues with students becoming vulgar or profane towards the teacher and what have you. So I've been thinking a lot about that problem because I know that that's just sort of the tip of the iceberg of some of the problems that we've seen in the past year. And I'm wondering what the support is going to be for the teacher in a similar circumstance with yonder pouches, because a student may simply say they don't have their phone that day and be hiding it, or put a dummy phone in the pouch, or there's several ways to open the pouch on their own, or to make it not fully closable, or what have you. So I kind of imagine that it's sort of similar circumstances and events, and I would like to, can we illustrate, please, for people, what is the school's response to behaviors like that? What are we doing to make it so that teachers aren't being verbally abused in their classrooms, and that students are receiving appropriate intervention?
So the first piece I want to share is that we expect that there will be some students who are not compliant, who do the things that you've identified. I mean, we recognize that's going to happen. What our primary goal is, we want to have a reset of the instructional learning day. So students who are going to have their phones out and be disregarding the rules will be substantially less than the numbers of issues that the teachers have to address now. So the students who are disruptive to that degree, we expect will be significantly less, thereby taking up less of the administrator's time to deal with. And then they are going to be able to be either having parent conversations about students. We have a process called SST, which is Student Service Team, where we talk about resources that can be provided for students who are struggling. We will be able to have administrators in classrooms observing and giving feedback on instruction, really doing all of the pieces of administrative work that can have a positive impact on learning. We also expect that the numbers of students who require the level of intervention that you are talking about will be less, thereby allowing the counselors to spend more time with individual students. We also have the TLC room, which is, this is my wording, I'm sure there's a job description somewhere in the district for it, but it's basically a space outside of the classroom where there's an adult who's able to process a situation with students, is able to give them a quiet space to re-regulate when they're dysregulated, to be able to use some strategies to regulate again, and to work with the adult to make sure that they're in a place that they can productively go back to a classroom and do their work. So really, we have many of the services and the layers of support that students need. The challenge is that last year it was overwhelming and the services were not able to be implemented to their fullest because we had so many students in need. So we do expect we will still have challenges, but really are looking to have the vast majority of instructional time be uninterrupted, productive instructional time.
Can you illustrate just a little bit further, because I'm not clear on the connection between that moment in the classroom that we were talking about and the student being in TLC or wherever it is that they need to be? Is the expectation that an administrator is going there to support the teacher? How does that work?
Generally, yes. Students, so it depends the grade level, but when a student gets I'm calling it dysregulated. It's a blanket term that I'm using to describe a student who is becoming very distressed, angry, may be starting to cry, whatever, something that is not a calm and ready learner. I'm using as a blanket term for dysregulated, they're not in control of appropriate emotions at that stage. So the teacher will try to positively redirect the student to give them an opportunity to make an appropriate choice, to follow the directions. If they don't, oftentimes teachers can use a variety of strategies, like asking the student if they want to step out in the hallway and have a private conversation. Do they need to see a guidance counselor? There's a variety of ways that we can offer students an opportunity to go and utilize a resource to get themselves back to being positive learners. And if the situation continues to escalate and the student is not engaging in some of that problem solving with the teacher and is not accessing any of those services, then yes, there's a call made for someone to please come to the classroom, and it can be an administrator, or we have building monitors who can also respond and help the teacher to help the student pick a positive way to deal with the situation.
Okay, and this is maybe more of a big, broad, giant picture question. But I get that cell phones are a contributing factor to these very disruptive, disturbing behaviors that have been happening this past year, but they're only part. So, and from my personal experiences as a parent in the district, and a lot of feedback from other parents and also from a few teachers, although I would love to hear from more regularly, I don't see that we're effectively dealing with the big problem. So what are we doing? Where is the ship going, and how are we getting there with improving this situation, and not just with external kind of controls like yonder pouches?
Well, that is a very, very broad question, because there's a lot of layers of things that need to be addressed. And so first, I would argue that we would have more engaged students across the board if we are able to do the work we need to do for curriculum and instruction. So that is a foundation. We have to have a strong core curriculum that is meeting the needs of diverse learners, responding to the climate and culture of a broad range of students. We have to represent all of the experiences that our students come to us with in our curriculum. And we have not had the ability to do the writing, the curriculum writing, the professional development needed, the authentic assessments needed that, I don't see that the staff in the district have had that opportunity in, I don't know how long. There's, you may recall, I don't have it in front of me, Karen's curriculum map document of how long ago some pieces of the curriculum had been addressed. So that's work that has to be done. We have to address the needs of struggling students from an academic standpoint, because I believe in any district, students will react in a stressed and upset way when they're frustrated with their learning, when they don't have the tools that they need to be productive and feel good about themselves from an academic standpoint. And that goes all the way up through high school. It's much easier as an older student to become disruptive than to potentially be embarrassed. So we have to respond to all of those needs. We need to continue developing our tiered supports so that students across the continuum have ways to be successful learners. We do not have a core curriculum for social emotional learning. We're not explicitly teaching students some of the skills they need to meet these competencies. And it wasn't in place prior to the pandemic. It's exacerbated by the pandemic in, I think, the opinion of everyone. But I have had no evidence, nor have I had anyone tell me that as a district, in a comprehensive way, we were providing this to students across the board. So we're making assumptions when students come into the district that they have certain experiences or have had opportunities that they may not have had, and that impacts how they react to situations. We have students coming into kindergarten who may or may not have had preschool, and when you've, or a formal childcare setting, or a group childcare setting, and all of those variations affect the skills that you go into a formal, structured kindergarten with. That's just an example. So you make the assumption that when they get into kindergarten, they can do school. But not all students come in with that ability. So we have to teach them how to do the things that are expected in a school setting, including how to interact appropriately with each other and with adults, how to understand that their decisions impact the world around them, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to provide that foundation first. We have services to address students that are struggling from a social emotional standpoint. We have a lot of social workers, school adjustment counselors, guidance counselors, building monitors, people in TLC, and they're skilled staff, but that is an upside down triangle. So we have to simultaneously support the students who are struggling and create the strong foundation so that the goal eventually is to right-side the resources we have. We also, I've talked about it before, we need to continue improving our special education programming to support our neediest students. So there's a lot of layers. So your big question was exceptionally big. We have excellent staff in the district, but we have to provide them resources to do that. And I do not see that historically they have had the resources that we're trying to put into place now.
Thank you. I know I threw a big one at you there, but
No,
I think
that's all right.
I think it's really helpful for people who are either living it out from day to day in our schools, including the staff and the students, and also all the parents who are worrying at home, to be able to hear that larger vision and get a sense of where it's going and how we're going to get there. So I think that's really helpful. And also, I just wanted to say, I really appreciate what you said about students with academic deficits they need to be understood from that point of view, because many students who come up with emotional or behavioral difficulties are really students who have not been identified or served properly when it comes to instruction or when it comes to special education. So that's, it's not their fault.
No,
And
not at all.
what we need to do is identify them as early as possible and serve them the right way. So I appreciate that.
No, and one of the pieces, I couldn't agree with you more in that regard, which is one of the reasons that we made the decision to adopt one consistent kindergarten screener so that we had the same baseline across the board. It may not seem like the hugest change, but if you are looking at one set baseline for incoming kindergarten students, then you're identifying the same types of supports that could be needed, and we're not running the risk of one building or classroom setting different expectations for incoming kindergartners, unintentionally missing some learning gaps. So everybody's been exceptionally, they've been working extremely hard, but something as simple as giving them one resource. This is the screening, so you all start from the same place. It's a simple thing, but it really can help start us off in a good place in terms of providing extra support.
I just had a couple other straight practical questions about the pouches, sorry. So
If
there's
it's
several,
exclusive to the pouches are a discussion point on the agenda later on.
oh, okay.
I think it would make sense just to
Yeah,
kind of
okay.
continue that
I'll save
discussion
it.
when we're
No
actually supposed to
problem.
have it? Yeah, is that okay? Are they all about the pouches?
Yeah,
Okay, so are you okay with waiting for when we
yeah,
discuss it?
that's fine. Yeah,
Okay.
no problem.
Do you have other questions? No. Other questions from the school committee? Member Johnson Musa, go ahead.
I actually just have a comment, and it's going back to the testing, because it seems like we're having a discussion about, oh, it's frustrating that DESI isn't supporting the pooled testing. It's frustrating that we don't really have the staffing, because it actually does take a significant amount of time. But what we're really talking about is, as a nation, the richest nation on the planet, deciding that we should just accept a certain level of illness and death. That we're coming into a school year where the virus is just getting more contagious, and there's no guarantee that it won't become more harmful or more deadly. There's no guarantee that our existing vaccines will continue to work on it. And they're saying the public health experts are saying pooled testings in schools is really essential to having an effective public health response. We're looking at creating vectors of transmission that could be extremely dangerous. And because most of us, able-bodied people who work for a living, can kind of keep going on wearing masks or not wearing masks, being vaccinated or not being vaccinated, that we're just okay with the elderly and the disabled and people with immunocompromise, like possibly getting extremely sick and dying. And I just think it's important from time to time for us to remember that's what we're talking about, a country that hasn't made the decisions it needs to make to put the resources in for schools to do what they need to do. And the one attempt we have in Massachusetts that I think is really important that our committee voted to endorse is the Fair Share Amendment, which at least makes some step towards people in Massachusetts who make over a certain amount contributing more money towards education and transportation and infrastructure. So I just wanted to raise that. I wanted to occasionally take a step back and look at the big picture of what's happening.
Can I just add a tiny bit from the more direct, less global perspective, I guess, is when I spoke to the department after the last school committee meeting and said, this is the information that was presented by the local health department and the epidemiologist. One of the things that they reminded me of, is that at the state level, the Commissioner of Education is working with the Department of Health and Human Services heads and with the state level Department of Public Health. So I think I'm anticipating, but I won't speak for her, but I can say that's where things are challenging, I think, for me, and I wonder if for all of you, is certainly someone that I respect and knows does a very good job, being Jennifer and Meg in our local health department, are saying something, and then I'm getting guidance professionally from the Department of Education where they are working with the state level people from the same departments saying something different. So what my hope is that when Jennifer and I meet, we can figure out something that will work the best way possible to do. None of us want anybody to get sick avoidably. But I think it's very clear that there's this interesting flow of information from state level, including one that does guide my work. So it's an interesting position. So I'll let you have had the last word on the global piece, but from a more pragmatic piece on my end, that follow up.
You're all set, Glenn. Any other questions or comments on the superintendent's report? Okay, so we'll move into the school committee reports. Report from the chair. The first item is the school committee self-evaluation. We undertook this process with the assistance of MASC, the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, and Liz LaFont, who's our representative there, created they have a tool, an online tool with 39 questions that we put out to our school committee members. 6 of the 7 of us participated. I did get all of the feedback back, and I've asked Liz to work with me on addressing specifically written comments that were provided that were outside of the scope of the self-evaluation. And so she and I have not had a chance to address that yet, so I anticipate that reviewing the self-evaluation and discussing it will be on the agenda for September. And then the superintendent already mentioned Tuesday, August 23rd, the tour for school committee members. I just wanted to make sure it was on there for all of us. No, that's totally fine. And then we'll do subcommittee reports, and I think let's do policy, and then we'll do talk about redistricting. Member Johnson-Musad, go ahead.
Sure. So there are essentially 2 projects we're working on right now. One of them is a large project that has many different pieces. So it's the overall overhaul of our school committee policies that we've been in process with since before the pandemic. It had a long interruption there. And then the other part was the charge from the school committee at the last meeting to develop a policy around cell phones. So on the first item, we're essentially getting reoriented. We have some help from Susan Farber now, who is helping to kind of shepherd all of the different policies and some version control problems that we've had, tracking which ones have been through the first and second readings. We think we're all caught up so far on the work that got started here and has come before us so far. And so there's both process issues and content issues that are being worked on. So Christine can speak to, she's working through some policy questions before the next chunk of the policies come to the full school committee, and she's reaching out to the Massachusetts Association of School Committees about that. And then the other thing is that we do have a contract with MASC to help us with this process, and the vision is that in the end it will all be uploaded onto a searchable place on the internet, and we need a better picture of what that looks like, what that service is that they provide. So she's also asking them about that. I don't know if you have an update on that. So that's, maybe I'll pause there and then we'll talk about the cell phone.
So I did have a very good conversation with Liz. The school committee, as part of the contract for the whole policy manual review, did engage in the agreement that it would be hosted online by MASC when it's done. So that there's been no financial commitment or anything of that by the district, because it happens when the policy manual's done. I had a couple of questions in sections E and F that I shared a Google Doc with Liz so that she can just get in and answer my comments. And then I am in process of doing a markup of section G, which is rather long. That will then go, I believe, to the policy subcommittee, but you correct me there. But that should be done by the end of next week. Section G will be done. So then E and F would be able to come to the committee, and then G will be next on deck.
And I think that we agreed on a process where all the policies that you're working on would kind of come before the full committee first, and then for the first reading, and then you'd have everyone would have an opportunity here to give feedback, as well as give feedback to us in advance of the subcommittee meeting. At the subcommittee meeting, we would make any adjustments and then bring it back for the second reading. So whenever EF and or G are ready, or elemental PQ.
Elemental PQ is going to be a little bit, but
Yeah.
it is feasible, depending on the length of the agenda, that in September you could have all 3 sections.
Yeah, okay. And we can have extra meetings if needed to get through them. I'm So excited about getting through this work, so thanks for that follow-up, Christine. And then on the cell phone use, Christine did share with us a cell phone use policy from Boston. And I think we had a good discussion. It was very preliminary. I think our interest is in drawing the connections in our policy statement to student learning, which I don't think was completely done. It was very operational, the Boston policy. So Christine was also going to see if Mask Mask does not have a model policy on cell phone use. We do have a policy on, it's the appropriate use or technology, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
Electronics
electronic
policy, yeah.
media, something like that, yeah.
So we'll have a question of whether to incorporate the cell phone thoughts into the appropriate use of electronics policy or have it as a standalone. And we will also be having discussions about what community engagement around the policy, but just to be clear with the public, the kind of policy questions, the questions about student outcomes and so on are one bin, that's really within the school committee's purview, and then how that vision gets operationalized is really in the purview of the superintendent. So we hire and fire the superintendent, we evaluate you, but we don't get in and meddle about operational, the way our policies are operationalized by the superintendent. So I think that's it for now. I think we've got another meeting scheduled, so we'll just keep doing the work.
Thank you, Glenn. And then for redistricting, Jean, you want to take it and I'll assist? Oh, sure, a question for policy. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, it's kind of like both a Glenn and Christine question. And it's pertinent to the SEL framework that you had shared, Christine. So part of the picture here is about, if you look under schools, this is the second circle out. No, sorry, third. It's hard to tell the difference. No, it's the second. I'm right. Sorry. It says school-wide culture, practices, and policies. So have you given any thought to how our existing policies do or don't support what we're trying to achieve here with students when it comes to self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, et cetera? And are there changes that need to be made? Is this going to be a lens through which policy-making should be viewed from this point?
I defer to the chair of the subcommittee if you want to.
Yeah, I guess, I think we do have a responsibility, if these are our values, and this is kind of what our learning approach is, to see to it that the policies that we're reviewing and revising kind of reflect that. We want them to be the most updated with our current approach as possible. And I think that we are making an attempt to do that as we work through the policies.
As an addendum to Glenn's statement, MASC has also been reviewing their own policies. And so when we get a sample one, it's from them, and they've been reviewing their own to ensure that they're providing model policies that have been looked at from a lens of equity and diversity. So anything we get from them has been reviewed from that perspective.
Yeah, I'll just add that I think if you look at the work we've done so far in terms of looking at the mask model policies, you can see a big improvement in terms of getting our policies in line with the current best thinking around social emotional learning and equity and so on. So I've been really pleased with the work we've gotten to do, and I think it's making a difference in the district.
I apologize. I should have asked for questions or comments from the committee, so that was my fault. We'll go on to redistricting now. Vice Chair Wall, please.
Our first goal is to make sure that the school committee has gone through all of the schools that they would like to see. I know that I have never been in some of the school buildings and think that would be nice before we talk about how to use the buildings. The second thing that has happened is, of course, we've got the NESDEC study, which has made recommendations on the pluses and minuses of each of the buildings, and how they have also made 6 different recommendations on how to use the buildings, particularly the elementary school buildings. And so my goal as the chair of the redistricting committee is to have a dialogue with the community, the parents, anybody who's interested in changes that we might have envisioned for the elementary schools, be given an opportunity to come to the committee meetings and have a dialogue. This is not going to be a meeting where I will tell you what we're going to do and you smile sweetly and go away. This is a meeting where you will be asked to talk with us and have us ask you questions about your views on how the schools should be used. We are thinking about including the start time for the middle school and the high school in this discussion. We're thinking about including moving the 5th grade into the elementary school, because we've gotten feedback that that's something that parents would like to have done. We're also including moving the 8th grade back into the middle school. So as you can see, this is going to be a huge upheaval to the place you thought your child was going to go to school when they first get into the school system. And we want to make sure that everybody who has an opinion and has input into our goals will have an opportunity to work with us. And then we'll bring back what we find out at the various meetings to the school committee, give them a report, and then we will task the superintendent with implementing what we have come up with. And it will take, a huge part of the year for her to make the changes that we might come up with. So I hope that by the end of October, we would have all of these meetings held, so that we could, this October, so that we can then
Get to work.
No, I was concerned that
You
not the
would-
meetings were expected to be done by the end of October, but the changes were expected by the end of
No, no, no,
October.
no.
So I had a moment,
yeah.
Ms. Wall, where I got quite concerned about the timeline. But yes, we will coordinate dates. The meeting with our collective bargaining units has been scheduled but not held yet, to start with staff.
And we will we are waiting until school starts to start these meetings so that you will be focused on what we're talking about. You can read the NASDAQ studies online, they're available. But I think it will be an interesting conversation to have with the community.
Thank you. I did just want to highlight what Christine had added, which is the process itself will kick off with meetings with all of our unions regarding the redistricting process and getting their feedback first, as they are a critical stakeholder in the whole process. And then certainly any comments or questions from the rest of the school committee. Okay, excellent. Okay, so that, as far as I know, that's the subcommittees, that's the subcommittee reports. And we'll go on to item 6, the budget update. Andy, you've been so patient. Thank you.
That's okay. No, you have in your packets the end of the year status for both the local budget and the revolving accounts. As you can see from the previous reports where the projected budget was showing a negative in the local appropriation, we brought that up to 0 as we anticipated we would. I can answer any questions on the local appropriated budget or any other things, but I did want to draw your attention to, in particular, the revolving account status, because as you can see, Some of it we anticipated having to use primarily for the years of contract settlements. For the contracts I reported out was just under $650,000. But when you look and see where we started the year as far as the balances available in the revolving accounts to where it is that we're ending the year, those revolving accounts are what we use to supplement our operations. So we started the year with $3.7 million in the combined revolving accounts, and we're ending the year with $2.376 million. So we have eaten a big chunk into those revolving accounts, which is to some extent what they're there for. However, I would say the revolving account it's not run dry, but it's gotten lower, we'll say. So just keeping that in mind as we proceed ahead and going forward. And we've anticipated, if you look at our budget we built for FY23, we anticipated having these funds, less funds available to us out of those supplemental sources as we built the FY23. So any questions you may have, I'm open to answer.
Any questions or comments from the school committee? Not even Secretary Ekstrom? Nothing?
Not even for me.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we've got next up, items 7 and 8 are a continuation of our surplus items project. We've got 2. We'll start with the books, and give me 1 second. I remember how to do this.
Can we do both of them at once?
We can try. Give me 1 second to get organized here. Sorry, I lost my place. So we can you do have documentation of both in the packet for this evening. We can certainly do a consent item to approve both of them at once. I would need a motion that reads something like, I move to declare as surplus the GPS library materials and GPS math resources for algebra, both as inventoried and as included in the meeting materials.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion about any of these items? Susan Farber, how can I help you? It was Ekstrom and Johnson Musad was the second. Is that right? I think, yeah. Any further discussion of these? Well, that was easy. Okay, so we'll go to a vote. Do we have any abstentions? Any no votes? So that passes unanimously for both the algebra resources and the books. Thank you. Hold on, please hold. Okay, so we're now on to item 9, which is the cell phone discussion. So just to recap, because this is carried over from our July meeting, in July, we actually tried to do 2 motions from the committee. The first was to refer it to policy for a policy discussion and possible policy implementation, which we did. And there was an interest in also doing a motion in support from the school committee in support of the decision to implement the pouches in both the middle school and the high school. And folks definitely felt like they needed more time to ask questions and to have discussion. But I would actually like to open with the motion, which, as you know, would include us then having a full discussion before we would put anything to a vote. But I would like to talk about a motion that, okay, so, sorry. I would like a motion that reads, to directly address learning loss among students and towards improving the social and emotional environment for GPS middle school and high school students. I move the Greenfield School Committee express full support for the implementation of the Yonder Locking Cell Phone Pouch Program at both the middle school and the high school. And I'm just looking for a motion at this point.
So moved.
That was Member Ekstrom, and a second,
Second.
and that was Vice Chair Wall. And let's have discussion. Who would like to go first? Secretary Ekstrom, I saw your hand first.
I'm questioning what our role in this is, only because this is an administrative decision and we don't put our toes into the administrative roles and actions to follow up on policy. So I just want to understand a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and I think this is an important part of the discussion. I think for me, as a school committee member, and someone who is responsible for hiring our superintendent, who then implements our policies, that it's critical that when there are significant pieces, we show some sort of support for the decision making. And I think particularly in situations where there's a high amount of concern or interest, in this case, it's a really unique solution, and it's not without a lot of questions and even a lot of anxiety from folks about how it will be operationalized. I certainly agree that it is ultimately an operational decision, but much like when we have questions about hiring, about the ability to attract personnel to work in the district, we do actively work with the superintendent, even when that's really beyond our scope as the school committee. And I think this is something similar. We're not, as I explained at the last meeting, and I'll reiterate, we're not making the decision. We're just indicating that we support the decision-making and the implementation. That's how I would answer that, and thank you for the question. Do you have something further, other comments? Other school committee members, other questions, comments? Member Martini, go ahead.
Sure. In part to answer Member Ekstrom's question from my perspective, and then I also had a couple of my own questions. I think that the committee has several roles that are pertinent to discussions like this one, and therefore it's important for us to have them. The committee has a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that the funds of the district are being spent effectively. There are questions and concerns that have been raised about whether this is an effective use of money. So I do think that's relevant to us. As far as the committee's role in defining policy and making sure that the district is following our policies. We don't have a policy about cell phone use, so that's a hard one. If the district is taking some sort of action that we don't have policy about, except that we do have things like a student handbook that has been approved with rules that are already set out that should cover this issue, which leads to questions about how effectively those are being upheld and enforced and put into practice. And the last piece, as far as I view the committee's role, is about the oversight of the superintendent. And I really want to support Christine because I appreciate your vision about a lot of things and insight about student outcomes and what goes into them. That being said, I don't think it's the job of a school committee to be a bunch of rubber stamps or like a group of yes men for the superintendent. We're here to provide oversight, and that's what we should do. That doesn't mean that we always have to operate under the expectation of some kind of loyalty test or something like that. That's what it feels like to me when this discussion comes up. So I don't think we should feel worried or like we're being offensive or something like that by seriously discussing issues like this. I think it's part of our job. We're elected by the people of this town to represent their views, and that's what we should do. So that being said, I do have a couple of questions about the pouches. Each pouch costs a certain amount of money. there are several different ways of thwarting these pouches, and our kids are going to try them all. And several of those ways damage the pouch, or they risk damaging the pouch. So what's the expectation? Who's going to pay for the replacement?
We get free replacement pouches, so we would have replacements available.
How many replacements are part of the contract?
I don't have that in front of me.
Okay, and if we exceed that number, then what would be the expectation?
We would be looking at students who are habitual pouch damagers and responding to them. So we're using information that we're getting from, we're using information we're getting from the vendor about the rate of breakage and need to replace based on their experience. So, but is the question, are we going to ask parents to replace them?
Well, I think that is something that was talked about when I was discussing this with you before, and I know that there are other school districts that do charge parents. So it's, say, $30 the first time your kid breaks the pouch, and then $45 the next time, and then $60 the time after that. I have concerns about that. So
that's not the plan right now. The plan is not to charge parents. We do, you brought up the handbook and that there's language in the handbook. There's language in the handbook that parents would be expected to pay for the replacement of school equipment that's damaged or destroyed. So that's already something that the school committee has voted, approved in handbooks. But it's not the intention at this stage to be charging parents. I think we would look at different routes if we had continual offenders for pouch breakage.
okay, well, I certainly hope so, because considering this was a decision undertaken without input from parents, really, or without the approval of parents in the district, then to expect them to pay to replace something when kids are kids would probably be particularly offensive to people and
I do think
raise equity issues.
Yeah, the kids will be kids piece is certainly something that we understand. Like unintentional damage happens, just like it happens with the computers that we provide students and any other equipment, the books, the physical education equipment that we provide. The piece where I'm talking about still not talking about having parents replace the pouches, but of different ways we'd have to think about responding to kids and having conversations with families is habitual intentional destruction, which is very, very different than I'm a 10 or 12-year-old child fiddling with something, like I'm playing with the paperclip. That's a very different thing.
Right.
Than,
No, I'm talking about when kids mess with the fastening mechanism on the pouch in order to get it to unlock or to get it not to lock all the way so that they can take out their phone when they want to or what have you.
Again, right now, we're not intending to do that, but I do just want to raise the point that the committee does have language related to other school equipment. So, I don't know if that's a point that you'll want to discuss when you review the handbooks, because that is a piece, but we're looking at this separate from that language that's already been approved for right now.
Okay, and you also answered the mayor's question before, or rather you weren't sure about that, about the return policy for these pouches and what exactly the time frame is on that. I also wondered what the obligation of the district is to renew this. So we do this year. If it turns into a disaster, what's the requirement or obligation of the district
Nothing.
to keep going with this next year?
No obligation.
Okay, so there's no expectation to renew?
No.
Okay. Can we, at some point, have those pieces of information about the return policy and about how many replacement pouches
Sure.
are included
Yeah.
in this?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mayor Rita Gardner, go ahead.
I fully understand how many parents would be concerned about this in the sense that they are cut off from their communication with their children during the day, especially if you've only raised children during the last few years of cell phones. But many generations were raised without cell phones, including my own two. So it can be done. And so what I'm particularly interested in and how I view it is balancing that concern, which I know is real for many parents for a variety of reasons, is balancing it with what I think is the underlying thing that you so eloquently stated earlier about being able to establish a foundation for everyday learning and the ability for students to be able to do that. And when you have reached a situation where faculty, most of them, I'm sure, at some point during the day, if not all the time during the day, can't teach, that their frustration level has to also be considered in this. And some of the commentary that I've heard and read doesn't take into account an empathy or an interest in how the teachers are going to be helped in their ability to teach. So while it seems like a lot of money, given what we're seeing in numbers in this budget, it's not a huge amount of money to try something that might actually advance learning in a better way, especially when, as you've just indicated, there's the obligations are for a year, I assume, the contract was. So it's important, you don't know whether you've wasted the money until you've begun to spend it, until you've gotten the results from what the project, what the program has elicited. So I think you have to try. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Other school committee, Member Johnson-Musad, go ahead.
Well, this has been an interesting journey this last month. I have to admit, it was difficult to get the proposal or the information the way that it came, but because I felt very ambivalent. I mean, on the one hand, I actually am kind of, as people probably noticed from my comments, a root cause person and sympathetic to the idea of wanting to help young people to be able to make choices and deal with the compulsions, and seeing the kind of the avarice of these tech companies and designing these products to make them so compulsive for all people, but especially for young people with developing minds. They're especially deleterious. But at the same time, I'm looking at a school system that does not have the resources. I don't think that this amount of money would be sufficient to provide training that would really make a difference. Providing teacher training, and then somehow with a couple hours of training, they're going to be able to completely manage this, what seems to be an incredibly unmanageable situation. And it has to do with I think the teacher-student ratios, but there's very little we can do about that. We have the budget that we have the limitations that we have students having big struggles, having had them before the pandemic and having them now even more so. So I guess I just kind of feel the almost desperation of the teachers and the administration to want to try something. And I had a long talk with the superintendent, and that was very helpful. Thank you for your time, Christine. And I guess I'm in a space of thinking, if this is what you want to try, I think we should give it a shot. But I also think it is a substantial investment, and I think we are on a frontier. I don't think there is data or research, really. We don't have, as far as I know, evidence of effective strategies for resource-limited districts to address these issues at a root cause level. So I think trying things and evaluating is important, and the superintendent did make a commitment to me that she would, establish what would be the measurements of success, and then we would have those, and we would get those measurements and find out what the data shows about the impact of this on student learning. And with that, I'm, not a fan. I can't say, I know the motion is fully support, and I hope no one hears me as being a big cheerleader of this. I honestly don't know if I were superintendent if this were the intervention that I myself would try, but you are a leader. I do believe you're doing your best to try to handle multiple, very complicated, very long-standing problems in our district, and I want you to have a chance to try something and see how it works. I think there's some improvements and probably some learning and growing about our community and what we kind of expect or want in terms of community engagement, but I also sense that there's a willingness to learn about that as well, and I'm sure that community engagement, community communication is also going to be part of the strategic plan. So with all of that, I guess I will vote yes for this. And it was a difficult, one of the most, I think, difficult things that I've been presented to deliberate about. And I do appreciate you asking for our support, even though I do see it as within your role, and certainly asking questions and providing oversight is important. But so those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Johnson-Musad. That's very well said. I don't think I could said it much better, so thank you. Further questions, comments from the school committee? I'm going to let Member Deneve go first, and then Member Martini.
Catherine can go first because I'm really echoing all of the wonderful things that you said. I just have slight things to add. Do you mind which one of us goes first?
I don't mind at all.
Do you want me to go first? Okay, I will go first. I would be a no vote. And the reason why really has nothing to do with cell phone distraction, because I agree with
I'm going to ask you to move closer to the microphone, that's all.
Sorry, is this better? The reason why has nothing to do with cell phone distraction, because I do agree with everyone that that's an issue. But I don't think that making such extreme decisions, either for unfettered use on one end or extreme lockdown on the other, neither one of those I think are going to work. So the reason why I would be a no is because we're not seeking balance here, and other districts have sought balance. Other districts are considering less expensive options, trying them out, have tried them out. Pioneer's trying something out. Hadley's seeking less expensive options. So saying that this is going to be, like last month, that this is just going to be something that everyone's going to have in 3 years is a bold statement with really nothing to back it up. I'm sorry, but while I want to read my statement. While I agree that cell phones can be distracting, we need to reevaluate the way children are being taught. Incorporate social media into the education. Utilize the devices that these children use all the time. It does nothing to encourage learning when a student has a mental block thinking about their device. We as a society would rather remove something new from the equation rather than change the equation to fit the new. So there's a lot of people who say the same thing that the mayor said, well, I grew up without it. Well, I also grew up without it, but on my campus were all the payphones required to make communication happen with my parents. There is no payphone anywhere. And knowing that while I support the superintendent trying all of the things and bringing all the things up, the parents have not had any time with new communication protocols from the superintendent. Many families, I can count 5 or 6 families that have choiced out because of the communication issues, specifically around what happened in June with the threat. So I think that moving to this extreme edge without actively engaging the parents and giving them time to gain trust, to gain social currency with the community is really putting the cart before the horse. Parents asked you on Monday directly to you, when are you going to solicit my opinion? When are you going to ask me how I feel about this? But you didn't understand what they meant. I had to tell you they meant public forums. So, and you said, well, I don't have plans for that. And that to me that bothers me, because when we had our meeting last month, we were given a lot of misinformation. We were giving information that wasn't correct from the police chief. We were given one example from the Washington Post, written by a guy who is like the head of the $3 billion a year school security industry. We weren't given a nuanced or pro and con version of this info. So we have to hold you responsible for acceptable results. That's our job, right? So that's the gig. But I'm not getting this whole other part of the community, and I feel like a broken record because I ask over and over and over again, and you tell me that it's happening or that you're working on it, but I don't see it, and the parents don't see it, and the community doesn't see it. So I think that without that part of it, you're asking parents to do labor with their child with this Yonder pouch, but you're not asking for them to be a partner with you on it. So I think we need to come to a middle ground where we look at other things. There's no reason we can't try shoe caddies for 2 or 3 months. Those don't cost anything. And I know you think it's a liability issue, and of course it is, and you've researched it, but the Yonder pouches are also a liability issue. Those kids are gonna swap them around, they're gonna fall out of backpacks. You cannot differentiate one pouch from another. You could take the tack of some districts who have had like art programs where decorate your Yonder pouch. We'll feature it on social media. These are all progressive ideas and thoughts that should be part of our school culture, but I'm not hearing any of that. It's very black and white. So I don't think how you can expect people to be down with this without going through all of these steps. And I just don't understand, how did you expect to deal with this controversy? Did you Google what the parents thought? Because you kept bringing up Chicopee. But if you read Western Mass News Live, at the very end of the Chicopee article, it is quoted, they talked to parents, and parents all said, we didn't want this. This was rammed through. We specifically said no, and we tried to come and speak, and we were not allowed to speak. So the principal saying everybody loves this is not true. So I guess I'd like to know how you thought that this was going to go over nice and smooth without any social currency with the community to back it up. Because I want to support you, I just want to know.
So I guess the first thing that I would add in terms of the school committee's role in receiving feedback from the community is we offered a chance for public comment at our special meeting on July 25th, and no one was there for public comment. We had a session with the representative from Yonder earlier this week, and it was 20 or less people that showed up.
Yeah, I was there.
And we've gotten a handful of emails from the public to the school committee, the vast majority of which were in support. And we had a few people who spoke tonight, the vast majority not in support. I strongly feel like we've opened up the ability to provide feedback if folks are outraged and we haven't seen it. So that's how I would respond to that, and I'll allow Christine, of course, to say anything.
I did not at any point expect that it would go smoothly or swimmingly, or however you described it. I don't believe that has ever been presented to the committee, that it would be without challenges. So, to suggest that was the intention is not accurate. We do expect there will be challenges. We know that we will have to work with students and provide additional information to families about what this is. We have ways to work with the kids to talk to them about why this is a direction that we're going, what the challenges are with the use of phones in school. We have ways to address that. I do agree that we've had avenues for people to share concerns, and I was open to hearing those concerns, which is why I made sure that we could return the pouches when they were purchased. What I have heard is a lot of feedback from staff about the grave concerns that they have about the situation that they dealt with during the last school year and their absolute need to have things change. They are the ones who initiated the conversation about going in this direction. So we looked into, would this be something that we could do that would address their concern? I don't think it's going to be smooth, but many changes that we make aren't always smooth, but that doesn't mean it's not going to result in a positive change. In terms of parent input, and I've heard that about a number of things, and it's a place where parents do have a right to share concerns about things and about how the district is performing, about how we're moving, but I also have to make day-to-day and ongoing decisions about how to operationalize and how to implement school committee policy, and parent forums are not held for those things. That's not how operational decisions generally are made. And Kate, just to make reference to a point that you had made about, things that are given without necessarily having parent input or choice. We do the same thing with computers in classrooms and with textbooks and all the other resources in the school environment are not things that we have parent forums before decisions generally are made and moved forward. So it is an uncomfortable decision. It is and I don't expect that the committee rubber stamp it. It's a conversation that we have to have. What I am weighing is the expense, which I do think $16,000 is something that I should be accountable for. I completely agree with Glenn's request that we have objective, measurable goals for the use of this program. That's extremely reasonable for the committee to ask for. It's sizable enough, but it's not so sizable. It will not pay for a paraprofessional. That was a question that was raised at some point. A paraprofessional makes more than we would be able to pay with the money being used for this. I also look at the impact of time for the people who are supposed to be instructional leaders, helping to make change in the buildings, and what they spent their year doing. So it's not an easy decision. I didn't do it in a flip and dismissive way, but we had an urgent situation that the staff raised, and I and the administrators are trying very hard to support them in a way that they feel will help get the school back to being a positive and productive learning environment. At the end of a year, we will evaluate. If it works, wonderful. If it doesn't work, then we will certainly know that, I would expect. But to continue going the way we were last year is unsustainable and is not healthy for anybody in this environment. So I get this is a big thing. It wasn't done in a flip and offhanded way. So I think it's just...
I don't think you did it in a flip or offhanded way, and I'm certainly not interested in micromanaging you. That would be ridiculous. But to Amy's point and to your point, doing all of this open meeting law, including the public telling them on the website, that's law. That's not culture. We have, the policy says that we engage with the community because that is the culture that we have chosen as a school. That's how we want to be as humans. So if we're not enacting that, that's something that we're failing at. Putting everything on the website and saying, you know, this is your moment to come and speak, that's law. So that's bare minimum. Engaging your community is how you thrive as a school district. So that's why I'm going to bring it up all the time until I see steps towards thriving. And nobody's seeing that. So that's why I'm going to bring it up, because when a parent says, why haven't you talked to me? And you say, well, I don't have any intention to create this, I'm going to ask you about it, because I think that that's absolutely something that has to be talked about. Accountability has to happen for that, because that's part of the culture that we have chosen as a school district. But I'm not trying to micromanage you, but I think that if we're going to have a conversation about $17,895 for a NESDEC study, we can certainly have a nuanced conversation for $16,000 a year for a cell phone pouch policy. And I don't want to feel railroaded by information that's not accurate, which is what happened on the very first day. So I'm glad that we've progressed. That doesn't, my mind isn't changed yet, but it's good that we're talking about it instead of just, we're fine with it. Because I asked you, Amy, why are we planning to talk to parents about it? And you said, why? So that's why when I get to this point, I've had all these steps from last month to go through and waiting for this policy that we have, this culture that we have to blossom from this committee, but it doesn't come. So that's why I'm going to bring it up every single time, because that's just the duty, because that's part of who we are. But I defer it now to Kate, because I spoke too much, even though you have many questions. So thanks for answering my questions.
Not that many, actually. I wanted to respond to something that the mayor said, and that I think pertains to just some other things that I've heard during committee meetings before, and that I think contributes to the divide between parents and the committee and parents in the district. And it's something that is heard a lot when people talk about cell phones. Well, we didn't used to have them, so surely we can get by without them now. We used to live without seatbelts. We used to not have car seats. I hear the same type of commentary from people about those sort of things, who think a parent is being overzealous because they insist on their child's car seat being installed correctly, or their child wearing a seatbelt or things like that. And guess what? Thousands of kids used to die every year because we didn't have appropriate safety measures. You know, cell phones are here to stay. They're not going to go away. And they're extremely useful safety measures for parents with children. I don't mind sharing with you that my own child broke a bone on the way home from school, our schools. And the only reason he was able to reach me, because he had a cell phone. So we have a ton of walkers in this district, kids who ride bikes to school in this district. It's a district that's kind of heavily weighted that way for students, as opposed to schools that are mostly bus kids. So there are really good reasons for parents to want their kids to be accessible to them for that. And secondly, we did not grow up in the age of Sandy Hook and Parkland and Uvalde, and I don't think I need to go on naming all the school shootings. You know, I would like to note that the actual risk of a child being hurt or killed in a school shooting is still really low, but it doesn't feel that way when you are sending the most precious thing in your life into a school building. Especially into a school building where parents have repeatedly, routinely, and continue to express concerns about being unable to get through on the phone to school staff here in Greenfield schools. So I think that we need to be respectful of modern parents, parents who are parenting now with the world that we live in now, and not expect people to just step away or give up on the tools that they have available to them to keep their child safe in an increasingly dangerous world. We need to take a more respectful stance about that. I do have concerns about the effectiveness of this use of money. I realize it's only $16,000 this year, which is a very small part of the school budget. However, if we do this for 10 years, we're talking about well over $100,000. It's quite a lot of money. I think we should be aware of that. And if that $100,000 results in a massive shift in our school culture and manageability of classrooms and the sustainability of our teachers staying here, fabulous. I think it's a wonderful use of $100,000. But these pouches are easily thwarted. It doesn't take away the behavioral moment that the teacher needs to deal with when a student isn't following the rules, because we already have rules about this and they're just not being followed or enforced effectively. So I have concerns about effective use of funds. I have concerns about whether this supports our values that we've established, things that we're trying to teach our kids about self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills. I have concerns about equity about this. For students who are worried about situations going on at home or elsewhere in their life that they are going to be in a state of anxiety about because they're not able to be in contact with somebody at home. I'm concerned about students with disabilities who have a need to use a cell phone, sometimes for learning reasons, sometimes for emotional reasons, and whether or not they would be singled out or stigmatized even if they were given an exception to this rule. So for all those reasons, I remain unconvinced about yonder pouches, and I can't support it at this stage.
If I may, Chair Peretti, my point about the then and the now was about my understanding a parent's anxiety about being cut off from communication. And it was my only point. And so I was drawing the analogy of when I raised my children, not that long ago, they're not that old, and how we managed to communicate from time to time. I hear about the communication. Also understand that there is a new phone system being in place, but those things take a little bit of time and they take money. So my then and now was not a shot at any one particular thing or to say that it's not a different world. I have a 14-year-old and a 13-year-old grandchildren. One parent is an educator and is in a number of schools because she does consulting in how to do school turnarounds. We talk about these things all the time. My grandchildren like their cell phones and they use them, but they also go to a school where I don't think they're allowed to have them, and they haven't been allowed to have them since they've been in school to use while they're in school. So I do understand all of the things that are being said here. It was not a point I was trying to make about, well, and I certainly don't equate it with seatbelts and the need for seatbelts. That was not the point. That's all.
I'm sorry, Amy, I forgot one part of my thought.
Okay, it's got to be quick because you've gone way over your 3 minutes on this one.
Super quick. Just about the issue of whether or not parents should have input over certain things in the district. For me, I don't think this falls into the same category as minutiae, like how students are allowed to use a school computer or other things like that. Those nitty-gritty, day-to-day sort of things are not the sort of things I think parents are all that interested in or care about, because that's not something that scares them about their children. I think that this is it's in the middle for me. It's not as big as redistricting, but it's certainly not as small as the little things that are not going to cause people concern. So I do think that there needs to be a better effort made to get not just give parents, I don't think parents are looking just for the opportunity to state their concerns. I think parents want to have input and actually have their views taken into account before decisions are made that impact their access to their children, their kids' safety, and things like that. I think that's where the strife is coming from. Thank you.
Further questions or comments from the committee before we move to a vote? Okay, so I guess we're ready to vote, and I'm looking for any abstentions and any no votes. We have 2 no votes, Member Deneve, Member Martini. So yeses would be the 5 here. Yep, okay. So the measure does pass 5-2, and thank you all for a very solid conversation around that. And we'll move into item 10, which is the superintendent's evaluation, a process we started in July. And, well, we started way back, but the school committee piece in terms of the evaluation and writing it was started in July, and we had a plan to review the evaluation at this meeting. I received 6 evaluations written in the time frame that I requested, and 3 of those were done completely incorrectly. I've been in touch with those folks who have completed it incorrectly to notify them about that it was done that way. The 3 who did it correctly also know who they are. And what we're going to do right now is actually, first of all, I'm going to take ownership that clearly we needed a refresher. Our 2 new members who were not at the training in the fall didn't have any training at all. And it sounds like it would have been really helpful to take the materials that were provided and fit them to how you use them to fill out the evaluation, which I'm going to do right now. Earlier today, I set up, with Lauren's help, I set up a Google Drive that has all of, so in last month's materials, everyone received sorry, Philippe, I don't think I'm close enough. Everyone received the evaluation form that you would use to evaluate the superintendent, as well as the superintendent's what's it called? Supplemental. It's the materials that she's put together, and also a copy of the goals that the superintendent put together a few months back. I didn't actually look at what meeting we voted on those, but those were presented well ahead of time, and we voted unanimously to approve those goals, and those are the only items under which we can evaluate the superintendent. So I'm going to go through, and again, I've put everything online, so you didn't have to have paper. I think this is like, I don't know, 70 pages. We didn't have to print this again. But all of these documents, as they exist in my hand right here, are on the drive. So the first piece that you will see is the summative evaluation update, which is written by the superintendent, and it's a bunch of pages long. Next year, I'm going to give her feedback that she should put page numbers on it. It looks like this. And you would read all of that, and this basically says, and the next page in there is the goals that we voted unanimously to evaluate her on. And this speaks to how she went at these things. There's a second page, sorry, for the goals. So the goals is 2 pages. It looks like this. And then there are pages and pages and pages of supplemental documentation that help you to identify proof that the goals were worked on and what that proof looked like. And then the final piece, somewhere in here, is the actual evaluation form, which maybe I don't have it. I might not have the blank one, but the evaluation form is very obviously a DESI form. And what I would recommend, I wish I had it on me. I'm really sorry. It looks like I don't have it on me. But I believe it is 3 pages long, the form that you fill out. What I would recommend is actually pulling out the staple, if it's stapled, or remembering to actually work at it backwards. Start on the second section and then do the front page first. You'll find that it flows, at least I did. I found it flowed a little bit better. And remember that when you're evaluating, you're only looking at the goals for the year. And I think, well, first, let's talk about any questions about that. I'm sorry I don't have the form on me, but any questions about that? Please.
I just wanted to add to what you said, because that's, when I was puzzling over it, that's what I figured out, is like, the first pages are really to summarize
Yeah.
what your work is in all the following questions. So you have to do this second set of questions first and then come back to the first few pages.
I believe I can try to pull it up in the drive. So, and you should have gotten, is this the right one? No, sorry, hang on. You should have gotten an email from me earlier today, or it's in your email now that says, hey, these things are out here. Just give me a second to find it. Yes, here it is. Yes, okay. It doesn't look very pretty. Oh, wait, yes, it does. So this is the form. It's all right. It's okay. It's okay. So, yeah, that's the form. It's very big on there. You might be able to grab it and make it a little smaller. Yeah. It's landscape, and it doesn't want to recognize it. But it's a bunch of pages, like literally start at the back. Oh, sure. Yeah, if you don't mind. Is it in the back? Yes. Do you know where it is, Elizabeth? Here it is. It looks like this. And the first page is, oh my God. Okay, wait. It's so many pages. I am not, who cares that you did it wrong? We're going to do it again. We're going to do it right. Here it is. End of cycle summative evaluation report for the superintendent. I don't know why that seems complicated, but that's the word. I work in financial aid and I don't come up with names that are that boring. Front page, I tried to do it first and I couldn't, even though it's the page that's on top. Same with the second page, the performance goals. And then what I did find is that the pages that came after, 1, 2, 3, guided me to be able to fill out the first 2 pages more easily. Please read the instructions, because there are certain times when if you give a specific rating, one that's really low, one that's really high, you must justify it with a written comment. That's the only other piece I would give. And then obviously if folks have questions now or comments now about it, let me know. We'll do it now.
I guess I'm understanding you to say those who have done it completely incorrectly are to do it again.
We're all going to do it again, even the ones who did it correctly. It doesn't matter. Everyone's going to do it again.
Okay.
Yeah. If you did it correctly, you know who you are, and you can turn in the same one again or something similar, or tell me privately, you already have what I would evaluate the superintendent on, and I'm fine with that. If you did it incorrectly, I've already contacted you about it, and I'm happy to help folks individually with individual comments. But yes, we all get the opportunity to do it again. Member Johnson was that, go ahead.
And I think Liz at Mask would be available for people who have questions, like if this orientation wasn't wasn't everything that you needed.
Thank you for having the binder on you.
Used it extensively when I did my thing, which apparently I didn't do correctly. But Mask did tell me that they will train us for free.
We did have a training from Dr. Hool in the fall, and we did make sure, I think that you guys got the binders because you have one, but certainly it's an unwieldy process. And each time that we did a step throughout the year to get to the point where we look at the goals and vote on to support the goals of the superintendent, I had to go to the binder to figure out what the hell do we do next and how do we do it. And thankfully, the superintendent has participated in this before. So between us, as well as at least 2 phone calls to Liz, we were able to figure it out for the year. This has been a challenge in this district, and we're going to get it right this year, and we're going to get it right every year after that. So that's why we're doing it again, is to make sure we get it right.
I know that, because I've looked at the Massey website about all of this too, because it's hard when you don't have any training. It's not from, it feels a little inbred if it's just you all, like all of us just telling each other how to do it for me. And I have been through the Massey trainings a couple times. They do have their training that they do on a PowerPoint on their website. And which I find helpful to go back and look at, just to recalibrate exactly what it is that is the ultimate goal and all those things. Anyway, just.
Yeah, I did that. I know I did that. I mean, I called Mask and went over the whole thing and did it and did pages 4 through 7 first and the whole thing. But if we're doing it again, that's fine.
The largest
time
problem
has passed, so I have even more feelings and
And
thoughts
honestly,
and
the largest problem, and
experience.
everyone who was informed that they didn't do it correctly, evaluated on things that are outside of the scope of the goals. That's where people made mistakes. They weren't things that were included in the goals, and we can't have that in the evaluation. Any other questions or comments?
Just to help people understand what that means, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that the idea is that it's only fair to have expectations of the superintendent about goals that were set and agreed on, because if you are having expectations outside of that, then the superintendent sort of never knows what's coming as a shot out of the dark, right? So it's important to be fair in that way, especially because this is one of the only roles in which some employees' employment evaluation is a totally public thing, right? So it's important to be fair and respectful in that process. So I just felt like there was like a lot of lingo in this conversation, and probably people watching it are kind of clueless about what we're talking about. But I think that's kind of what it sounds like the issues boil down to.
Yeah.
And also the rubric is like stupidly, ridiculously confusing, and I'm
It is.
glad
The
Jeff
tool is
figured it out,
terrible,
but-
but like any other employee, you don't, when you have an evaluative process of an employee, the employee knows what they're being evaluated on. This is exactly that. We already have decided ahead of time what we were going to evaluate Christine on, and so we need to stick to that. Member Nini?
Did you all vote on who the aggregator of the data was?
It's me.
It's you? Are you also the aggregator of the data for the self-evaluation?
I've stated that that was Liz LaFont.
Oh, okay, right, yeah, you said that earlier. So you're aggregating this and Liz is aggregating that. Okay.
Other questions or comments?
Just my understanding or memory from the past, and maybe you can refresh my memory, but that our completion of this form is essentially a form of deliberation, and that all of our comments are public with our names attached to them. So I just wanted to say that. I mean, I think there
That's
can be
absolutely correct.
some concern when one person is aggregating, what does that mean? But it should all reflect everything that we've shared with you in this second round anyway.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. Any further questions?
I just wanted to say kind of on the flip side of what I said before, that a lot of the kind of options given in this rubric are very limiting. And I think that the topics, like the broader topics they're meant to help break down, are not necessarily accounted for in the options that you're given. So I think that it must be a real challenge to make this process really fair to the superintendent without shutting down legitimate differences of interpretation, I guess, of those things. So I just want to make sure that there's enough room for that, that it's a real quality instrument and evaluation, if that makes sense.
Comes from Desi, so I won't go any further than that. It comes from Desi. Any further, Axstrom?
I'm going to say what I
Everybody's so talkative tonight.
I'm going to say what I say every time we do one of these. I hate that this is such a public event, not because the public shouldn't be, I don't want to say privileged, but not that this information shouldn't be in public domain, but it's that it sets up an oppositional relationship as opposed to being supportive and saying, you know, if I say I'm extremely unsatisfied, but really I'm not extremely unsatisfied, but I'm not just somewhat unsatisfied. And it doesn't open a door for communication and talking about what the real sort of heart of the issue is. And I hate it. I hate it. Because I don't think, I'm a weird person, I think evaluations are okay. I'm okay with hearing good, bad, or otherwise. And that's the point, is to improve and figure out ways to work together, all of those things. Doing this in public and kind of, and in my head, it's, that's not helpful for anyone. It doesn't make, I don't want to say it doesn't make us look good, but it doesn't make us a positive support. So that every year I say it, and I'm saying it again this year.
I'm really relating to you on that one, Susan, because sometimes something that you think is an issue within that category happens to be articulated really specifically in a certain answer, and then you sort of have to give that answer, even if that's not really, it doesn't really reflect what you mean as far as how, satisfied you are with a whole big topic. So yes, it's very, very off-putting and uncomfortable, and I hope that somebody has Desi's ear about this process.
Well, I can also say that we will discuss the evaluation in a public session the plan is to do it at our September meeting. And I think at that time, you have the ability to be more nuanced in your verbal comments about the evaluation itself, and we'll have that opportunity.
What is your time frame for completion?
We're going to do it the same as last time. You get 2 weeks to fill it out, so it wouldn't have to be to me 2 Wednesdays from today. So I don't know. Thank you. That would be the 24th, the day after the tour of the buildings. Any further questions or comments on this one? Okay. We're going to go on to the item number 11, which is the strategic planning service procurement. There is a memo, I believe, from Laura Phelps, who is the city director of procurement. And she has outlined the process that was gone through and the bids that were submitted and the details about the process of evaluation. And at the end of that, the bottom of the first of the page there in bold, she's given her recommendation. And I would like at this time a motion that reads, as TMS Incorporated was recommended by the City of Greenfield procurement officer to be the responsive and responsible bidder, those are her words, with the lowest submitted price, also her words, I move the Greenfield School Committee contract with TMS for strategic planning services as outlined in the RFP. Anyone on the motion?
So move.
That was Member Wall. And a second, that was Member Ekstrom. And discussion, please.
I have something.
Go ahead.
Those are the words that she used here. There's a reason for it.
Yeah,
That is the appropriate language to use under 30B when
Yes.
you're awarding a bid. So
thank you.
responsive and responsible bidder and lowest submitted price. It wasn't a subjective.
I didn't want anyone to think I had come up with such creative language on my own.
No, the state still came up with that language when they wrote 30B.
Thank you.
Rules around it.
Further questions or comments? Member Johnson-Musa, go ahead.
So, I mean, I agree with the procurement officer on the basis of the criteria that have been listed, but I'm just curious, so is that the entirety of our vote on this committee, is essentially whether to endorse the work of the procurement officer or to speak in broader terms about the proposals and the appropriate vendor for this work?
Well, that's a good question. Any of that would be appropriate after we've contracted. We can have discussions about the scope of the work at that point.
So, in other words, our job here as a committee is essentially is it kind of like, not to bring up a big charged topic, but the Electoral College brings their votes to Congress and Congress is just supposed to kind of approve? Or is this a place to have a discussion about whether TMS is the right vendor for our district?
No, we put an RFP out that said we wanted the service, and they responded to the RFP successfully, and we're going to move forward with a purchase of the service.
So what is the purpose of this vote? I don't understand. If the decision
To
has
move
been-
forward with the purchase of the service.
But isn't that already accomplished? Or the other option would be to not purchase the service and to perhaps go out to bid again? Or what are the other options, I guess, if we aren't enthusiastic about this choice?
I mean, I don't understand why explain why you're asking this.
Well, the vendor that's been chosen is a vendor that we already are using for our financial management. They have put forward in their proposal, they included having Judy Houle, who was the interim superintendent, serve as the consultant for the project. I understand that within the bounds of procurement, those aren't appropriate concerns.
Okay, so we'll keep those aside until after this. So I guess I understand your question is, it sounds like you're saying, I don't want to do this, so you can vote against it.
Okay. Okay. Great, thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion before we vote? Okay, so again, the vote is to move to contracting with TMS for strategic planning services. Did you have extra, were you were just grabbing your pen? You didn't? Okay. So we'll do any abstentions? One abstention from Member Deneve. Any no votes? One no vote from Member Johnson-Musad, and that would be 5 yes votes from the other members. Yep. Thank you. I believe, is that the end? Okay, so that is the end of the formal agenda, except for new business. Do we have new business items that folks want to bring up? Member Deneve.
I have new business. This is my favorite part of the evening. I have 2 new business items. I'm not sure if all of you got this. I'm guessing all of you got this from MASC. It's the conference happening in Hyannis. And when I went to the Division 5 meeting, I met a lot of local school committee chairs and members, and they were very kind to me and wanted to mentor me, and I made a lot of connections. So I did receive this in the mail. I assume all of you did, but I don't know. So I'm wondering, is somebody going? Has somebody been slated to go? And is the district paying for the conference? Do we go? Should I go? Because they did say that Greenfield doesn't usually go, so I don't know, I'm just asking.
Traditionally,
Yeah, so I
traditionally,
can't-
that is something that the district pays for. There's, within the budget, there are line items that are equivalent of that, and I encourage you to go. I've never gone because I don't get to leave my house ever. But
Okay.
you should absolutely go if you're interested.
I can go, I'm interested, and these people were interested, and I had a lot of convo about it, so I don't know how to do that. So if you could push me in the direction to give this to the district to... Yes, I can photo it and email it to you, because it has instructions. So, okay, that was new business. Yay, that'll be fun, because I did meet nice people who wanted to mentor me, and hopefully that will be great. And then my other one was, in April, we talked about starting a public forum pilot, and then we haven't talked about that since, so I'm wondering where we are with that, and
I can speak
Plans
to
are.
that a little bit. So the first thing is we did put out a survey to parents, and we had less than 24 responses. So to us, that's not a huge interest in having forums. We also had some large concerns about public forums come directly from our lawyer, because very often in those situations, what happens is that people get up to make comments and make comments that we really cannot allow, such as things about the performance of teachers or things that happen in the school buildings or in the classrooms. Those types of discussions need to be directly family to administrator or family to teacher or parent to the same. And our legal representation as a school committee strongly advised that we not go that route. We still went out and did the survey of the families and did not find enough interest to make it worth our time.
okay, my family didn't receive a survey. I'm just, so you're saying, no, we're not going to reach out, and we're not going to do this, and we're not going to pursue this?
I would say that if this is something you as a school committee member want to invest time in and is important to you, you can take on the responsibility of working with the superintendent, myself, and our legal representation of identifying how you would proceed that would not violate the employment rights of our staff, violate confidentiality of our students and staff, and so on and so on. There's so much liability around these forums. It's not something that we're choosing to undertake at this time, particularly because there has not been a specific outcry from the public.
Okay, so that's a no. Okay, well, I just wanted to check, because I didn't receive the survey. My family didn't, and no families I knew did, and thanks for letting me know. Maybe I will pursue it. It's good to know that that's an option.
I think it's really disingenuous to say that I said no. I explained to you exactly how you could proceed, so I did not say no.
So it's not a no, it's something we're going to work on as a committee, as a body?
Just explained to you, if you wanted to take it on and work with myself and the superintendent and our legal representation on identifying exactly how we would proceed, we'd be happy to spend the time doing that.
Okay, well,
And I also would encourage you to ask questions directly of either Lauren or the superintendent to identify why you might not have received the survey, because it was sent to everyone in the district, the same way that all other notifications go out.
okay, well, that doesn't happen, so, okay. Got it. That's all the new business that I have.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I guess I had two follow-up questions from things that Elizabeth said. So does anyone know, I feel like I heard a rumor that somewhere in the charter for the city that was updated, that there are things in there about funds being available for professional development for city councilors and school committee members. Is that a thing? Okay, so I'm just wondering, obviously if we have funds in the district to send you, that's great, but if there are funds available at the city level, maybe that would be something to access for your trip to.
I can't
Hyannis.
speak to the city budget, of course, but I'm sure if one of the school committee members wants to go to the conference, that.
We
I
can
haven't
afford it, but I
made
just
that
am curious
happen.
about this other thing, so, yeah.
Mayor Rita Gardner, go ahead.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, neither do
In
I.
the
It's
charter? In the charter, no.
I have not heard that as part of any of the charter discussion at all.
In the charter, no. And in the city budget, professional development for our employees, yes, but not for school committee members and city councilors. What we have available to city councilors are a number of online trainings for, through MMA, we always encourage people to do those. And there is a budget line item for us to go to the national, the state conference, the MMA annual conference, which is similar to what I was going to say before you asked that question, is in my school committee experience in the past, we often went as a group, not everybody, but there was usually 2 or 3 of us, and even the superintendent in many occasions, to those meetings in Hyannis, and they are really helpful and good, and there's good information given. So I would encourage you to go, and any other member that wants to go, as long as it's in the budget. I'm glad that question was asked, because I didn't really know. I would have 0 time available to me to do it, but those members who would, it's generally a worthwhile event, if nothing else, to also meet with your colleagues around the state that are school committee members as well. But yeah, no, there's not really any specific information, money available. Yeah, just to do that kind of thing for anybody that serves on a board or a commission. Even on the planning board, we paid for the again, the annual meeting ourselves, and then we got reimbursed. So
The other thing I wanted to kind of comment on, Member Denise, and I'm really appreciative of the follow-up about our earlier discussions about public forums, because it did seem like the committee had decided we wanted to pursue trying to have places other than here and at this time when the community could come and essentially give us public comment, which is something that we do once a month in this forum, and we know that there are legal concerns with what people may speak about during public comment, but we have guidance on the agendas about what those limitations are, and the public is generally able to follow those. So I don't, I'm hearing that there is an evaluation based on the data that there isn't an interest in the public in having more forums available to speak to us. That is not my perspective at all. I'm not sure I agree with that based on whatever data you've accumulated, but I guess overall, I think that it is true that for this body to make these kind of public forums happen and to create, to go to Oak Courts or to the high school or other places where community members may have more access to us than they do at 6 p.m. at the John Zahn Community Center. It really does require a resolve on the part of school committee leadership, and I think that certainly members can be encouraged to take it on and take initiative, have conversations with you and the superintendent about it, but essentially if there isn't that buy-in at the level of the school committee officers, I'm not sure that it's really going to happen in a way, and that's, I think, disappointing to me.
Anything else?
I just was hoping for more encouragement about that, so that's just all I'm going to say.
Anything else for new business?
Can I make a suggestion? Sorry. Christine, you mentioned earlier that you had some communication changes planned for the fall. This was when we were talking about the SEL framework here, and that you would be able to bring some more information about that to a future meeting. I think that, well, I would like to say that there was a survey. The superintendent sends out an update by email weekly, and really appreciate that frequent communication from the superintendent. I do think that the sort of low response rate says more about how well that form of communication is actually reaching parents than it does about whether or not parents actually want to share or provide input or spend time with members of the school committee to talk about their thoughts. Not everybody in our community is going to be able to easily access something like that for different reasons, differences of language, differences of reading ability, differences of technological knowledge, and things like that, and a lot of issues within their own personal wherewithal that have, nothing to do with whether or not they're interested in participating or communicating with us. So I'm kind of hoping to build it and they will come about this, and I think that I would feel pretty comfortable holding forums about particular issues, because then it's not a free-for-all. And we're going to hold forums anyway about redistricting, right? And we're not afraid to do that. I think that if it was done planfully, that it could certainly be done without risking personnel issues and things like that, especially since if it's only a listening session or a forum like that, then we do not need to have a quorum of the school committee, and therefore it doesn't need to be treated like a meeting like this under the open meeting law and broadcast for people and things like that. So just a few thoughts.
You have your microphone on. Do you have more comments about new business? Any other new business items? Okay, the final item on the agenda is an executive session, so we can approve minutes from the last executive session, and I would like the committee to nod in agreement that we don't need that executive session tonight. Glenn, you're not nodding, but I think you're going to lose by majority rules. Okay, a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We are adjourned at whatever time it is.
9 o'clock.
Not 8:57 p.m. Thank you all.